I hadn't even finished unpacking the first box when the sound hit me. It wasn't just noise, it was deep, heavy, and rolling, the kind of rumble that makes your chest vibrate before you even know where it's coming from. At first, I thought maybe a storm was moving in over the lake. I love storms, so for a moment I actually smiled. But the smile faded fast because the sound grew louder, more mechanical, and then I felt it. The ground under my feet had a faint tremor. I hurried to the window, curious, and what I saw made my stomach drop. A bright yellow bulldozer was crawling down the narrow street toward my property, its metal tracks grinding against the pavement, the front bucket angled forward like it was ready to bite. Behind it came 3 men in neon safety vests, each carrying something: chains, tools, crowbars. And walking in front of them, clipboard in hand, was a tall woman with sharp eyes and a face so still it looked carved from stone. I didn't even know who she was yet, but something in the way she walked, fast, confident, not looking at a single house, told me she was here for one reason: me. My house. My dock. My dream. The whole point of buying this place was that dock. I'd grown up in the city, boxed in by traffic and sirens, and for years I'd imagined having a little place by the water where I could sit with a coffee in the morning, toss a line in during lazy afternoons, or just let my feet dangle over the edge while the sunset turned the sky into gold. When I found this house online, I knew it was the one. The photos had shown the dock stretching out over still, glassy water, with enough room for a couple of chairs and maybe even a small boat. It was perfect, and when I walked into the backyard for the first time during the viewing, I'd stood there for 10 whole minutes just breathing in the smell of the lake. That dock wasn't just wood and nails. It was my escape, my quiet place, my promise to myself that life could slow down. And now, less than 5 hours after moving in, a bulldozer was rumbling straight toward it. I didn't even think. I threw down the box I'd been unpacking, half my dishes clattered out, and I bolted for the back door. My shoes were still inside, so I was running across the damp grass in my socks, yelling, "Hey! Hey! What's going on?" The woman with the clipboard didn't even turn her head. The bulldozer driver kept coming, the metal tracks crunching through the soft ground, leaving deep scars in the lawn. When the bucket reached the dock, the driver hesitated for only a split second, just long enough for me to think maybe he'd stop. But then the engine roared louder, the bucket dipped, and with one violent shove, it splintered through the first section of planks. The sound was like a gunshot followed by a scream, wood snapping, nails screeching out of their holes. Pieces of my dock flew into the water with dull splashes, bobbing like broken bones. I charged forward, waving my arms. "Stop. That's my property. You can't just..." My voice cracked, partly from shouting, partly from shock. The driver glanced at me for the briefest moment, but his face was unreadable, hidden behind mirrored sunglasses. He kept going, pushing through the dock with terrifying ease, the wood breaking apart like it was made of paper. Another section collapsed, sending my dream into the lake one plank at a time. My chest felt tight, like I couldn't get enough air. I'd barely had time to put my bags down, to breathe in that new home smell, and now strangers were tearing apart the thing I loved most. I finally reached the woman with the clipboard, planting myself right in front of her. "What are you doing?" "This is my dock." I was breathing hard, my voice shaking with equal parts rage and disbelief. She glanced up at me, not with guilt or surprise, but with a kind of detached annoyance, like I was the one interrupting her day. She didn't answer, didn't explain, just scribbled something on her papers as more boards crashed into the lake behind her. My dock was being erased right in front of my eyes, and she was acting like it was a routine checklist item. I turned back toward the bulldozer, wanting to throw myself in front of it if that's what it took, but 2 of the men in safety vests stepped in my path. "Sir, step back for your safety," one of them said flatly. Safety? My safety? They were destroying something I had saved years for, something I had fought to afford, something I had dreamed about on countless late nights when life felt too heavy, and they were calling it safety. I felt heat rise in my face, my fists clenching at my sides. Every instinct told me this was wrong. This was personal. No one moves into a new home and expects the first welcome to be a demolition crew. But there I was, standing barefoot in damp grass, the morning air cool against my skin while inside me, everything burned. The sound of the bulldozer's engine and the sharp cracks of breaking wood filled my ears until it was almost unbearable. It was like watching someone tear pages out of a book you'd written, crumple them, and throw them into the water. This wasn't just property damage, it was a violation. They weren't just taking apart a structure, they were ripping away the heart of why I'd come here. And in that moment, as my dock's last section tipped into the lake and floated away like it had never been there, I knew this wasn't going to be the end of it. Not by a long shot. I stood there, breathing hard, my socks soaked from the dew, watching the last few planks of my dock drift lazily away on the surface of the lake like pieces of a dream I'd barely had the chance to hold. My hands were trembling, not just from anger, but from the sheer disbelief of what I had just witnessed. I turned slowly toward the woman with the clipboard, and now that the roar of the bulldozer had stopped, the air felt eerily quiet, almost too quiet. The men in vests had stepped back, one wiping sweat from his brow, the other pretending to check something on his phone. The bulldozer driver shut off the engine, hopped down, and leaned against the machine like he'd just finished a normal morning chore. And there she was, standing in the middle of my yard as if she owned it, her pen tapping against the paper clipped to her board. "What do you think you're doing?" My voice was lower now, but sharper, like a blade. She finally looked at me directly, her eyes cold, her lips pressed into a thin line. "We're enforcing community compliance," she said, her tone flat and rehearsed, like she'd delivered this speech 100 times before. This dock was a violation of the Homeowners Association regulations. We are authorized to remove any illegal structure without prior notice. I took a step closer, pointing toward the lake. That illegal structure came with the house I just bought. It's on the property listing. It's in the sale agreement. It's been here for years. She raised one eyebrow, her pen still in her hand. That may be, but we've been telling the previous owner for over 2 years that the dock was not compliant with community standards. He refused to remove it. Now, since you've purchased the property, the responsibility falls on you. We can't allow non-compliant structures to remain, no matter how new the owner is. I stared at her in disbelief. Responsibility? Lady, I didn't even know your HOA existed until I signed the final paperwork 2 weeks ago. Nobody told me there was a problem. The previous owner didn't say a word, the realtor didn't mention it, and now you just show up, without warning, on the very first day I move in and destroy it? That's your idea of a welcome? Her expression didn't change. If anything, she seemed almost bored. Notice or not, the rules are the rules. You can file an appeal if you'd like, but, she paused here, letting her eyes travel slowly from my bare feet to my still unpacked boxes stacked by the window. If you're still living here by the time it's processed. That last sentence hit me like a slap. My eyes narrowed. What's that supposed to mean? She gave a small, humorless shrug. Some people find our regulations restrictive. It's not unusual for new homeowners to realize this isn't the community for them. It's better to know early, before investing too much. So that was it. This wasn't just about the dock. This was about control. They wanted me to know who held the power here, and they were willing to bulldoze through my property, literally, to prove it. I could feel my pulse in my temples, my jaw clenching so hard it hurt. I wanted to tell her exactly what I thought of her and her so-called association. I wanted to demand she rebuild what she'd just destroyed. But before I could open my mouth, a sharp, grinding noise cut through the air behind us. We both turned. The bulldozer, which had been idling near the lake, was moving again, only it wasn't moving the way it should. Its right track sank suddenly into the soft, muddy ground near the shoreline, tilting the machine at an awkward angle. The driver slammed it into reverse, but instead of pulling free, the track dug deeper, mud splattering in all directions. Within seconds, the massive machine was stuck, really stuck. And leaning toward the water in a way that made it look like one bad shift could send it sliding straight into the lake. The driver jumped out, waving his arms frantically. "We've got a problem." The three men in vests rushed over, boots sinking into the wet ground as they tried pushing, pulling, even rocking the machine. The bulldozer didn't budge. It just groaned under its own weight, the angle looking more dangerous with every passing second. The woman with the clipboard froze for a moment, then snapped into motion, barking orders. "Get more boards under the track. We can't let it slide." But the more they scrambled, the more obvious it became, they were losing this fight. The smell of churned-up lake mud filled the air, and the soft squelching sound from the ground made it clear the machine wasn't coming out easily. And that's when it happened. Her eyes flicked toward me. For the first time since she'd arrived, her confident, icy mask cracked. Her voice was tight when she spoke. "Do you have a boat? Or a truck? Something that could help pull this out?" I almost laughed, but it came out more as a short, incredulous scoff. "You just tore down my dock without a word. The only boat I had here is now useless thanks to you. And now you want me to help?" Her lips pressed together, and this time, she didn't have a quick answer. The men behind her were still struggling, grunting, swearing under their breath. The driver's face was pale, his eyes darting nervously toward the lake. The whole scene felt like a turning point. Just minutes ago, they had all the power. Now they were the ones in trouble. That's when she said it, quietly at first, almost like it hurt her to get the words out. "Please. If this thing goes into the lake, it'll cost the HOA a fortune, and probably the driver's job. We'll make it right. We'll pay for the dock. Just help us." And there it was, the first sign that the tables were starting to turn. The sound of her voice saying, "Please," was almost surreal. A few minutes ago, she had spoken to me like I was nothing but a nuisance, a new homeowner to be dealt with. Now, her tone had lost that razor-sharp edge, replaced by something unfamiliar, desperation. The men in safety vests were knee-deep in mud, grunting as they tried to wedge boards under the bulldozer's track, but each time they shoved one in, the board would just sink under the weight. The driver paced nervously, glancing at the lake every few seconds like he was watching his career teeter on the edge of that muddy slope. The machine groaned again, leaning just a hair more toward the water. The air was tense, the kind of tension that makes everyone move faster but somehow feel slower. I crossed my arms, letting the silence stretch between us. "Funny," I said slowly, "you were real quick to tear something of mine apart without asking. But now that you need something from me, suddenly it's a please." Her eyes flickered away for just a moment, and I knew I'd hit a nerve. She was used to people folding under her authority, but I wasn't in the mood to be one of them. I took a step closer, lowering my voice so only she could hear. "You want my help? Then we're going to make a deal. Right now. No games." Her pen was still in her hand, but for once she didn't look in control. "What kind of deal?" she asked cautiously. I pointed toward the lake, toward the empty space where my dock had been. "You're going to rebuild my dock exactly the way it was, same size, same style, same everything. And you're going to cover every single penny of it. I want it in writing before I lift a finger to help you." She hesitated, glancing at the men still struggling in the mud. One of them yelled, "It's sliding," and the bulldozer shifted forward a couple of inches, the front bucket dipping toward the lake. Her jaw tightened, and I could see the calculation in her eyes. The dock repair might sting the HOA budget, but losing that bulldozer could be a financial disaster. She snapped open the clipboard, scribbled quickly on a sheet of paper, and handed it to me. "Fine. Sign here, and I'll sign under it. You'll have your dock back within 30 days. I looked it over, her handwriting was quick but clear. It was simple, binding, and had the HOA's letterhead printed at the top. I signed, handed it back, and she scrawled her name beside mine without a second thought. The moment the pen lifted, I gave a small nod. "All right. Let's get your toy out of the mud." I ran back to my driveway and grabbed my truck, a heavy-duty pickup with enough towing power to drag half a house if I had to. While I backed it carefully toward the slope, the men watched like they weren't sure if I was about to save them or make things worse. I tossed a heavy tow strap to the driver, who caught it with a muttered, "Thanks," that sounded like it hurt him to say. We hooked the strap to the bulldozer's rear tow point, and I eased the truck forward, keeping the tires on the firmer ground while the men shoved more boards under the track to give it something to bite into. "All right, nice and steady," the driver called out. I pressed the gas gently, feeling the tension in the strap pull taut. The truck's engine roared, the tires gripped, and slowly, so slowly, the bulldozer began to inch backward. Mud splashed high as the track fought to climb out of the hole it had dug. The strap groaned under the strain, and my hands tightened on the steering wheel. The bulldozer shuddered, then lurched free all at once, sending the men stumbling backward as it hit solid ground. The relief was almost visible. The driver wiped his forehead with both hands, looking like someone had just lifted a mountain off his back. The men clapped each other on the shoulders, their laughter loud and almost shaky with leftover adrenaline. The woman with the clipboard let out a long breath she'd probably been holding for the last 15 minutes. She looked at me then, not with victory, not with smugness, but with something I hadn't expected to see in her eyes, respect. "Thank you," she said, and for the first time, I believed she actually meant it. I didn't smile. I just gave a short nod and climbed back into my truck. 30 days, I reminded her before driving off toward my garage. The next few weeks were almost strangely quiet. I still saw her around the neighborhood sometimes, but she never gave me that cold, dismissive look again. Instead, she'd nod politely, and I'd nod back. True to her word, a crew arrived about 2 weeks later, not the same crew, of course, and they rebuilt my dock exactly as it had been, only this time, the wood was fresh and the craftsmanship was solid. When they finished, I stood at the edge of it, feeling the boards firm under my feet, the lake stretching out in front of me just as it had in my dreams. The HOA had tried to break me the day I moved in. They wanted to send a message. But in the end, they were the ones who had to sign their name under mine, promising to fix what they had taken. And every time I sit out there now, watching the water ripple under the fading evening light, I can't help but remember the sight of that bulldozer stuck, the panic on their faces, and the moment they realized they couldn't get out without me. Sometimes, standing your ground isn't just about refusing to back down, it's about waiting for the moment when they have no choice but to come to you. The day the new dock was finished, the air over the lake felt different, lighter, cleaner, almost like the place itself was breathing again after weeks of tension. I stood there barefoot on the fresh planks, running my hand along the smooth, sanded wood. The scent of cut timber still lingered, mixing with the crisp smell of the water. It was exactly how it had been before, only better, stronger, sturdier, built to last. The crew had packed up and left an hour earlier, their work quiet and professional, the opposite of the chaos that had ripped this place apart on my first day. Now it was mine again, fully, and without the shadow of their arrogance hanging over it. But that victory didn't come easy, and the memory of how I'd gotten here was still fresh in my mind. Every detail of that first day, the roar of the bulldozer, the crack of wood splintering, the cold voice of the woman with the clipboard, was burned into me. It could have ended very differently. I could have lost my dock forever. I could have walked away bitter, maybe even sold the place just to escape the fight. But instead, I stayed. I made them fix what they broke. And I didn't just get my dock back, I got something more valuable, their respect. For the next few weeks after the bulldozer incident, the HOA seemed to keep its distance from me. No surprise visits, no surprise inspections. The same woman I'd clashed with didn't approach me unless it was necessary, and when she did, her tone was different, measured, almost careful. The smugness was gone. I'd forced her to sign her name under mine, and I think she knew what that meant in a small community like this. Word spreads. People talk. And people had talked. A few of my neighbors stopped me on the street during those weeks, curious. "Heard you had a run-in with the HOA, one older man said while watering his front lawn. "Heard you won," another neighbor added with a small smile. Even those who didn't like to openly criticize the HOA seemed to carry a flicker of satisfaction in their eyes when they mentioned it. Apparently, I wasn't the only one who'd had a problem with them. I was just the one stubborn enough to stand my ground. The day after the dock was finished, I sat out there with a cup of coffee at sunrise. The water was calm, glassy, catching the early light in streaks of pink and gold. I leaned back in my chair and let the cool breeze off the lake wash over me. There was no bulldozer, no clipboard, no strangers tearing into my peace, just the sound of small ripples hitting the wood and a pair of ducks gliding by without a care in the world. As I sipped, I heard footsteps behind me. I turned to see the same woman from that day, the one who'd once stood in my yard like a general on a battlefield. But now, her posture was different. She didn't look like she was here to inspect or demand anything. In fact, she looked hesitant. "This is nice," she said, glancing out over the water. I studied her for a moment. "Yeah. It is. You remember it?" Her lips twitched like she almost smiled. "I do." She stepped onto the dock, careful, as if she didn't want to intrude. I wanted to say, "Thank you. For that day." I raised an eyebrow. "You mean for pulling your bulldozer out of the mud?" She gave a short laugh, and to my surprise, it wasn't forced. "Yes. And for not letting it get worse than it already was. We could have handled things better." That was as close to an apology as I was going to get, and I decided it was enough. "You did what you thought was your job." "I did what I had to do to protect what's mine," I said simply. She nodded slowly. "Fair enough." We stood there for a moment, the silence between us no longer hostile, just still. Then she turned to leave, but before she stepped off the dock, she paused. "You know," she said, "you're not like most new owners. Most people don't fight back." I looked out over the lake, letting her words hang there. "Maybe that's the problem," I said quietly. She didn't reply, just gave a small nod and walked away. That night, I stayed out on the dock long after the sun went down, the stars scattered across the sky, their reflections shimmering in the water. I thought about how quickly peace can be shattered, how easily someone can try to take something from you if they think you won't resist. But I also thought about how, sometimes, life hands you the perfect moment to push back, and if you're ready, you can turn it around completely. This dock isn't just wood and nails to me anymore. It's a reminder. A reminder that the things we fight for often become the things we value the most. That the line between losing and winning is often just the choice to stand firm. And maybe, just maybe, it's a reminder to the HOA too, that they can't just bulldoze through people's lives without expecting someone to dig in their heels. Now, every time I watch the sun sink behind the water, I think about that bulldozer stuck in the mud, about the panic in their eyes when they realized they couldn't do it without me, and about the moment they had to ask for help from the very person they tried to push around. That memory makes the view a little sweeter. And if they ever try something like that again, well, let's just say I'll be ready.